So we're back on.
Yes.
All right. So I guess we'll kind of. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Always.
I know you.
I always have things I want to talk about.
You do tend to have things you like to talk
but
about.
I very rarely get permission, so.
Okay. Susan says you're here.
Anyway, good to have everybody joining us. We'll just go ahead and let Elijah go ahead and move us into the study time.
Go ahead and I'll let Elijah go.
Of course, you know, I think everybody's probably up to speed on the news events of the week and how Trump and his lady have tested positive for COVID, and
So far, there's 11 or 12 from his.
from the staff.
Funny how no Democrats have tested positive. It's only Republicans this week.
Right. Well, they're too much gristle, I guess, in there for anything.
What
to
a
make
fun
any,
word.
Yeah, I just use gristle. So.
Well, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, I guess.
We got our Canadian cousins online with us, which is
Yeah,
great.
nice. So anyway, we had an interesting experience. When did Joseph and Ben come over?
Thursday.
Thursday. He had Joe's having a revival at the church, and he brought the speaker over here because the speaker had about a year ago come across the Wyatt material.
And he was like, of all the places.
And Joseph is like, well, and the interesting thing is that Ben, he goes around doing revivals and stuff he's from Alabama. And
You gotta be.
because I went down to the meeting last night and I asked him how's the COVID thing affected his schedule. You know, he said everything was canceled. Everything was canceled. So I mean, this is like one of the only meetings that he's had this year. And he comes to the place
Like,
where
apparently everybody's revived. We're all good.
yeah, it comes to the place where they get talking about the Wyatt material. Now, what this guy does, his specialty is
Ancient languages.
ancient languages
Wow.
and manuscripts. You know, and but they got talking about the Wyatt material, and Joe goes, "Hey, I know a guy." You know,
I know the guy.
I know a guy.
One of the guys.
So he brought him over here Thursday. Man, we had
a good old time.
We had a great time. We had a great time talking. In fact, we brought him out here after about, 15, 20 minutes, and sitting in the living room. We came out here and started going through. We only got to Noah's Ark. After about an hour on just talking about Noah's Ark, they had to go. And for some other appointments. So, but we're going to go down to the meeting tonight at his church.
Nice.
It's only about 25 minutes from here.
Susan says they're not having any COVID there. We eat lots of garlic.
People just stay away from you naturally.
That's right. That distancing is built right in. Take this capsule, you automatically do
People will stay away from you.
But anyway, we had a great time, and it was just nice to see his interest. He's a really astute person, kind of presentations, and he's very, very interested. In fact, I gave him the book Thursday. He told me last night he's already halfway through it.
Wow.
So
He's one of those guys.
he's one of those kind of guys. And he's finding, I mean, obviously the light bulbs are going off.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, especially if he's pretty ingrained in study as it is, then I think it connects a lot of really interesting dots for people.
It does. Yeah. And, you know, it's the right time, maybe it's the right time for him, for God to approach him with this understanding. And so that's encouraging. So we'll see what God can do with that. I mean, it's the right time for sure as things are developing. But we'll see where it goes. We're going to go down tonight and Mom may even sing. So we'll see.
Really?
Maybe.
Ah.
Let's see.
We'll
What time is that at? Like 6 or
7
7?
o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, come on down. I'm sure. In fact, it was kind of funny. This old guy, this rickety old guy, comes hobbling up to me. I'm sitting in the pew before it starts. Did you shake hands? And I said, well, sure. You know, I shook his hand, and he goes, "You're Elijah's dad, aren't you?" And I'm like, Man, everybody, you just drive forever. Everybody knows Elijah. Go out in the sticks, go in the cities, in the country. Everybody knows Elijah. And I was like,
It's probably
I looked at
JC.
it. I was getting ready to say, "And you're one of his hardcore students." Yeah. I want to see some flips down the aisle. So.
Was it JC?
And then he says to me, "And your daughter works at the bank. Is she still working at the bank?" And I said, "You mean Angel?" He said, "Yeah, she's nice young lady, you know." And
who is this?
I have no idea.
Oh.
It's probably I don't know if it's JC is his actual name or just what people call him, but it's probably JC. Which is like Joseph's. He's like an older fellow who let Joe park a lot of his equipment on his property for a while. I went and did some.
He
work
seemed to
for
know
him around
all
his
about our
house.
family.
Yeah, probably him.
And he just knew who you
He
were
knew
just
you,
because of
he knew
height,
him.
I mean, I guess we do.
He knew
Shake hands
He knew
and
me.
just
I'd never
like,
met the
oh.
guy before.
And he's like, you look like one of those Bowen parents.
Yeah. Your offspring are
Like,
everywhere.
Yeah, we all got the hair.
To fruitful and multiply to a whole new level.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're back in business here. That's all I got to say today.
Had some cool experiences.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier, we're surprised with the news about the president and his wife being testing positive. The amount of people that are coming out with nasty, ugly death wishes and
Yeah.
comments,
It's sad.
horrible. I
Very
mean,
sad.
by revealing their personalities, it's terrible.
Yeah. Instead of saying, "Man, I hope the guy's saved when the Lord comes," they say, "I wish he would die," that kind of thing. I mean, listen. I hope Hillary and Bill, and let's get the message out. We hope all of them turn their
Change.
hearts to the Lord, and be redeemed. But because if they continue down the road they're going and stealing and murdering and doing all the things that they do, they're not going to go anywhere. This is all they're going to have, and that's sad. It's sad that anybody would lose out, no matter who you are and what you've done in the past. It's sad that anybody would lose out of heaven and living forever. But they think they got to drink infant blood, and crucify kids and stuff to have some extra years. Well, if they really want extra years, they just need to come to the Lord and they'll have eternity. So hey, kind of simple, isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty pathetic. The hatred, the vitriol hatred that some people are freely expressing. I mean, there's no apprehension. There's no in the dark, in the shadow. This is like right out in the open, right in your face kind of thing. To want somebody to die because they improved the military and the Veterans Administration and give us a tax break, you want somebody to die for that, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think of the state of things as described in the Bible. I was trying to find exactly where it was.
Calm light, darkness, and darkness light.
Well, that too. I mean, it's obviously all over the place, but where it just says that, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold.
Right.
That
Matthew 24.
that things are just going to, people are just going to disregard law and order.
Knowledge.
Yeah, and even Trump himself, he doesn't want, even though he disagrees with the deep state and the globalist mentality, he doesn't want him to die. He just wants him to think. I like what Mr. Reagan says. What's he say when he ends up, Rose? It's not
that they're ignorant. It's just they know so much that isn't so.
It isn't so.
It's funny.
Yeah, that's a great line, man. They know so much that isn't so. So, E, where are we going? We're going to Numbers 20?
Numbers.
Or
We're in 2 Kings.
2 Kings?
2 Kings and 2 Chronicles.
Okay.
Last week we talked about the miracles and things that took place around Hezekiah's recovery, which was some pretty cool stuff, like the sun going backwards 10 degrees,
Yeah.
things like that. crazy things that don't quite happen anymore. But
And some people are even thinking that we'll see another reset, if you will, with the flyby.
you mean, oh yeah, okay.
You know, because anything in space that has any mass to it, if it comes close, and this may be actually what happened back in Hezekiah's day there, in Joshua's day. There may have been a flyby, and it ended up just pulling the planet in such a way that it seemed as if time was going back or the sun was being regressed. You know?
Mm.
So,
God's not limited
I mean, I
in
don't
his
think
ability to pull it off.
Well, I don't think that God stopped the planet and started turning it the other way. Yeah.
What happened?
I mean, we don't-
Hezekiah was healed.
I mean,
He's dead.
we don't sense it, but we're at the equator. You know, the Earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour. You know, but if you're going down the highway and you're doing 60 miles or 65 miles an hour,
and you stop and go into reverse.
exactly, it would be like talk about putting the brakes on. You know, but it would have to be all of a sudden too. So it would be like all of a sudden you're here, and then you're still going 1,000 miles an hour when the ground stops, but you're still moving 1,000 miles an hour. That would be preposterous. So it's, you know, you're going down the highway and you're driving 65, and somebody goes by you doing 70. From your perspective, you look like you're going backwards, even though you're still going forward 65 miles an hour. You look like you're going backwards when somebody goes by you. You know, so it's that kind of thing that probably happened to account for the amount of time that was supposedly lost, they say. But again, it's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
that
that was quite a little number to pull off. But it was probably a planet,
cool.
asteroid, something that has a big mass that the gravitational pull from that was just started having an effect on the planet to nudge it out of its orbit. I mean, our orbit is not completely circular like this Lazy Susan here. It's kind of oblong, you know, oblong.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I mean, pretty outstanding miracle.
we play a little game, catch the apple, you know. You gotta catch
We'll
it.
swing the
You gotta-
turntable so
you gotta
fast that
bob
it fly
for the
off.
apple. You got to bob for the apple when it
Doesn't
comes.
look like a good idea.
Anyway.
Solid wooden surface. But yeah, so
I'm gonna move it over here so Angel doesn't get any ideas.
and then we also talked about the mistake of King Hezekiah in showing the Babylonians
Oh yeah.
all of the wealth of his house and all the wonderful things that he was blessed with.
Hey, come and get it.
And it's interesting the expression that's used there where it says that God left him that he might know his heart.
Right.
You know, that the idea of free will and the idea of choice, you know, is linked with freely choosing the right way or not choosing the right way. You know, and God allowing you to do that, because, you know, I've had conversations with people who use that argument, well, you know, if God is all good, why does he allow bad things to happen?
Sure.
You know, and vice versa.
'Cause you
If
have
he's
free
all
will.
powerful, you know, then he must not be all powerful because he doesn't stop evil. And, you know, they go through that whole
Sure.
reasoning, and it really just comes back to just, you know, allowing everyone, because like you wouldn't know, like if God altered the course of everyone's life so only good things happened, you would never know that you actually had a decision
Right.
in the matter.
I know last night's presentation by Ben was on Genesis 13, where Abram and Lot separate. Right, and of course Abram stays out there in the plain area, and Lot sets his tent towards Sodom. And of course, by making that one bad decision, of course, you know, he looked at it from a completely advantageous standpoint and said, "Wow, this, you know, it's the place is well watered, plenty of vegetation for my herds and whatnot." You remember what happened in the scenario there was that Abraham and Lot
I
had
should have come around the other way.
extensive herds and wealth, and there started to be contention between the workers. And so Abram basically said, "Hey, look, we got all this in front of us. You go one way, I'll go the other. Just, take your pick. And he went towards Sodom. And he made a bad choice. And that choice defined the rest of his life. And he had no credibility. I mean, when the angels came and they were going to destroy Sodom, all of a sudden Lot went out, to his kids, to his sons-in-laws and whatnot, and they were like, "Hey, old man, get out of my face! What are you talking about?
They thought he was kidding.
Crazy old." Well, they said he was they used the word mocking. They thought he was mocking them.
Yeah, that he wasn't really serious about what he was saying either.
Well, I'm sure he was pretty serious, but it was too little, too late. I mean, they saw the lifestyle that he had and that he lived, and to come all of a sudden and be all frantic about, hey, the Lord's going to destroy this place. So they're like, you've been smoking something, old man. Just go on your way, because they didn't see any lifestyle testimony that he was truly walking with the Lord, and to get a message from God like that.
Well, and no imminent danger. There wasn't necessarily something obvious.
And actually,
about
Lot wouldn't have gotten the warning message if Abraham hadn't been praying for them and begging for the extra chances.
And then, of course, even after the angels dragged him out of the city, of course, his wife got turned to salt, pillar of salt, because her heart was back there with her kids, which is kind of a natural thing. But she had to walk away from everything that she had. And then the two daughters, they ended up going up to Masada, living in a cave, and then telling their dad, hey, there's nobody else. Let's have our dad impregnate us so we can continue life. And they ended up with two tribes, Moabites and Ammons, that became very evil.
Yeah, and we're thorn in the side.
By making that one choice of going to Sodom, his whole family was impacted and ultimately destroyed.
Well, and you get the impression, though, that it didn't start that way. It just says that he pitched, towards Sodom.
But by the time you read the account, he's living in the city.
Yeah, by the time you get there, he's living there.
He's there in the gate, yeah.
So I think it was just kind of a slippery slope where he went there because it
you have to ride the donkey so far, That donkey ride is pretty hard.
Over the years, we thought many times about moving from here.
Yeah.
Moving closer to church or work or whatever, and I just
didn't get very far.
Just kept thinking about Lot pitching his tent towards Sodom every time we talked about moving down to the city or up into Christiansburg or something. And I kept thinking, no, he said, get out of the cities, get away where the houses are not crowded close together.
Yeah.
And 30-some years later, we're still here.
And Dad built houses close together.
Yeah. we must flee again. Thanks, Dad. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have. But so coming away from that, we're coming up into chapter 21, I guess.
So choice has always been a major thing. I mean, all the way back to Adam and Eve, they made a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now coming to this point, Hezekiah has passed away, and he reigned for 29 years, it says.
I'm sorry, I hadn't opened my Bible thing yet. Where are we?
We are in 2 Kings chapter 21 now. Yep.
All right.
So now this is his son Manasseh. So Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah. Nice name.
Hephzibah.
I've known a couple of people with that name.
Hephzibah.
In fact, that's if you remember watching the Avonlea series. That's Hetty is the short version of that name.
Oh, her name is actually Hephzibah.
Hephzibah.
Interesting history there.
Oh, they missed out. They could have been calling her Hephzibah the whole time.
Verse 2.
Hephzibah.
And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, after the abomination nations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the
Verse
children of
3,
Israel.
right there. Here it comes again.
For he built up again the high
High
places
places.
which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them.
So idolatry just kicked back in gear,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, and it's kind of outstanding to think about because Hezekiah did all this massive religious reform, and he goes through and he destroys all the idols and restores Passover and like.
Right. Now,
makes
do you think
everything-
that that's? I mean, he says he began to reign when he was 12. A 12-year-old, I mean, has got to be full of nonsense in their head, and
You're past that.
just. I mean, the Bible tells us that foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, and at 12 years old, I'm sorry. I mean, I know what's it, 13 that they considered you to be into manhood.
Yeah.
But you still got all those hormones raging. You still have,
All this growth to have happen.
you know, all these things still happening physiologically, and who knows how much TV he was watching, but you know, or how much internet, you know, is on his iPhone he was watching, but
But you know, there's nothing to say that the son was really with his father enough to observe those qualities in
Yeah,
him.
I mean, you consider that this is on the later. He was born at the later part of Hezekiah's life. I would assume that a couple years after he's given the promise that he would be healed. Because if he's 12 when he
And Hezekiah got
rules,
15
and Hezekiah
years.
had passed away, then Hezekiah was getting closer to his death at that point, I guess. But also just to see. Because I don't know whether it's a matter of the culture and the times, and maybe who Manasseh had as his buddies, or because I
What
don't
kind
know.
of advisors he had.
Yeah, what he must
Right.
have seen in his father, or if what he didn't see in his father, that allowed him to be comfortable making these choices that lead them right back into all the problems that they previously had. And I think that almost branches into our earlier discussion points from weeks past about how when you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. At 12, I don't know if he would have been educated on all the history of the kings at this point, but I mean, he goes right back to doing what Ahab and
well, he
other
takes
wicked
it-
kings
takes
had
it
done
to
before
a,
him.
Takes it to a new
a
low.
new
He
low.
basically takes it right back to Ahab's level,
Yeah.
or greater. He's just,
Yeah.
of course, he reigned 55 years, so there's no saying exactly how long this process was that he was just making
Right.
these decisions.
Right.
But so that's what he comes to.
Oh, I bet you he had the Chuck E. Cheese built, a year after he was king.
I declare free ice cream for the entire kingdom. No, like 12-year-olds like ice cream. Anyway, so
I want to know how they froze ice cream back then.
and to have it imported. Just wait long enough, I don't know. For all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. And he made his son pass through the fire, and observed times, and used enchantments, and dealt
He
with
was into
familiar
witchcraft,
spirits
man.
and
He was into
wizards.
witchcraft.
Yeah. And he wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger.
Wow.
Set up great
When he made his son
images
pass
to
through the
grow.
fire, that means he sacrificed his son
Yeah.
on the Baal's altar.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Gosh. Oh yeah. Well, we're no better off with abortion. We call it something different, but it's still taking innocent life. So I mean, it's really horrific what we do as people.
People don't understand the background of a lot of these things, and they use words that, if you understood where the Baal stuff came from, what they had was a big brass image of Baal, and he had arms like this, and they would bring their babies,
Very offensive.
put them in the arms of this image, and the arms would come back and drop it down into the fire,
Into the mouth of the
into the mouth
image.
of Baal, and then they would eat that roasted baby. And you've heard of the term
Carnival.
cannibal,
Cannibal.
right? What a priest, the old Hebrew word for priest is Cohen or Khan. And a Khan of Baal is where we get the word of cannibal.
Hmm.
It's also the root for the word
Carnival.
carnival. Carne meaning meat,
Mhm.
It's a scary looking thing.
feast of flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They had all sorts of
Can
really.
you imagine them? Can you imagine
wicked
taking
creature.
your baby after you've gone
I was
through
like,
all
I
of
think
the?
that is a baby in its
Yeah,
arms.
that's a baby in its arms. But they had terrible things that they did. There was Moloch, which another one that they offered to. And when James Dobson went over on a tour of Israel, they went to one of these places that they said was one of the altars. And he said down in between the stones, you saw these little tiny bones
Yeah.
where they had, offered those babies up there. And
And-
he said it's heartbreaking to think of the thousands of babies. But he said, you look at us today,
Same
and
thing.
we sacrifice our children for the sake of convenience and prosperity, and it's not the right time, and I don't feel like doing this right now. And he said, we're not any better than they were.
You can go to
Hmm.
over to Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. Even today, you can see some of the high altars that are over there in the ruins. They turned to ash, but you can still see them over there, the high flat areas and the altars that are there. And you just know that 3,900 years ago they were doing the same thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just can't imagine that the men are considered the priests of the family, so the men are the ones that would have had to take the infants and do that. I don't think a woman would have it in her to do that kind of
No.
thing. But obviously, she has to
Live
suffer
with
the
it.
loss of that child after going through labor and delivery, then to have it to be convinced somehow that this offering, of this life that you've carried inside you is for the good of the people.
Well, they probably didn't have any choice.
I'm sure
Women
they
in
did.
that
Yeah,
that
they did.
generation.
Women in
didn't.
that generation, let's have a
And
kid. so we
And
can-
here you had the king of the country,
Yeah.
supposedly a country representing the living God, who's doing this
that,
with his own
yeah.
child.
It's
Yeah,
just
demoralizing
we
for the whole
read
people.
this and we think, oh man, how ridiculous. But then our society does even worse than this. We rip them out of the mother, to kill them off. I mean, it's just crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, so crazy things going on in this time period. And verse 7 there. And he set a graven image of the grove that he had made in the house of which the Lord said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Neither will I make the feet of Israel move any more out of the land which I gave their fathers, only if they will observe to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them. But they hearkened not, and Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than did the nations whom the Lord destroyed before the children of Israel.
No, that's just very pathetic. That's the enemy within. That's not even an enemy from without. And so, that's what we're facing here in this country even today. It's the enemy within that's trying to take us down. It's not somebody invading us from another country. We've got people inside that are doing it. That's just what happened here.
Yeah, and of course the next verses are something that can give most anybody some hope, is that no matter, like you were mentioning earlier, that you can pray for these people who steep themselves in wickedness, and there can be positive results from that. And the Lord spake, verse 10 there, and the Lord spake by his servants the prophets, saying, because Manasseh king of Judah hath done these abominations, and hath done wickedly above all that the Amorites did, which were before him, and hath made Judah also to sin with his idols.
The Amorites were that offspring of one of Lot's daughters.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Just letting you know.
Therefore thus saith the Lord God of Israel, behold, I am bringing such evil upon Jerusalem and Judah, that whosoever heareth of it, both his ears shall tingle. And
My translation says tingle with horror.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, tingling.
Never had my ears tingle. I'm thankful for that.
Well, I think it stems from
and the word both is indicative of how tremendously large and major this would be.
Yeah. Verse 13. And I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria and the plummet of the house of Ahab, and I will wipe Jerusalem as a man wipeth a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down.
I mean, you know, God's had to do this over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the major time when he did it was at the flood. He did the same thing at the flood, just
Washing the dishes.
baptized the whole planet, wiped the whole planet clean with water. And along the way, though, he said, you know, that was the big dish he had to wipe. And now he's been, you know, we're seeing all these examples of the little dishes that he's been wiping. But again, it's full cup principle. You know, you go too far in the wrong direction, and God says, I just can't allow you to go any further.
Yeah. And from there, 14. I will forsake the remnant of mine inheritance, and deliver them into the hand of their enemies, and they shall become a prey and a spoil to all their enemies, because they have done that which was evil in my sight, and have provoked me to anger since the day their fathers came forth out of Egypt, even unto this day.
Is this timing-wise? Is this when Hezekiah was alive and he showed all his riches? Had they come while he was alive and taken them, or is that
Hezekiah?
Yeah.
No, Hezekiah's passed away.
I know, passed away, but I mean, when he showed all the riches of the kingdom to the Babylonians,
Mm-hmm.
did they come while he was alive and take all that, spoil that, or is that happening right here?
Well, this is just the judgment coming from God. Nothing has officially happened yet. This is
God's just telling them it's going to happen.
this is God saying your wicked actions have led us to this point, and
Right,
because
so
you
they're
have
going to be, when he talks
disregarded.
about it being spoiled there, that means they come up and take all, they plunder the region, take all the valuables.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So yeah, it hasn't happened at this point. I don't think it actually even happens in Manasseh's lifetime either. It happens relatively shortly after, but relative to history. Verse 16, Moreover, Manasseh shed innocent blood very much, till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to another, beside his sin wherewith he made Judah to sin, in doing that which was evil in the sight of the Lord.
A terrible legacy.
Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh and all that he did, and his sins that he sinned, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Manasseh slept with his fathers and was buried in the garden of his own house, in the garden of Uzzah, and Ammon his son reigned in his stead. And something that's kind of interesting that Kings doesn't record is in 2 Chronicles 33, I believe.
It's the parallel chapter.
Yeah. Which is what I was mentioning earlier with the idea of hope. Cause the children to pass through the fire, etc., etc. Yeah, so what you were saying is actually probably part of this as well. I'm just realizing that as well. Is he did actually face a captivity and spoiling. Verse 11.
In fact, verse 6 in that chapter, 2 Chronicles,
Mm-hmm.
causes children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom.
Mm-hmm.
Also observed times, used enchantments by spirits and with wizards.
Yep.
I mean, he was deep into the occult.
Mm-hmm.
He brought much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger.
And he
So
set a carved image, the idol which he had made, in the house of God.
Right.
So he went in there and set up
His own
an image
altar
in the temple.
In the temple.
Yeah, that he had a personal hand in making.
Talk about shaking your fist in God's face.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can even, I don't know how you can even get away with that. I mean, there had to be prophets and priests and temple people that would be just saying, this ain't going to happen.
Yeah, and verse 9 and 10 there, chapter
Yeah.
33, communicates it a little more. So Manasseh made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err, and to do worse than the heathen whom the Lord had destroyed
Right.
before the children of Israel.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
Imagine.
remarkable, yeah.
As horrific as we think this is, they did worse.
Well, and also that it is the leadership that leads them. You know, we've talked about that a lot too. That like the kings end up setting the tone
For the whole country.
for the whole country,
nation.
for the whole nation.
Yeah.
And as a result, the nation faces judgment on behalf of the
Collectively.
wicked rulership,
Yeah.
or you know, faces kind of the wrath of those situations.
Yeah, that's coming to your town very soon.
Verse 10. And the Lord spake to Manasseh and his people, but they would not hearken. Wherefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the hosts of the king of Assyria,
Mhm.
which took Manasseh among the thorns, and bound him with fetters, and carried him to Babylon. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers.
And you know, he was probably too evil for even them. They probably said, "This guy is way off the chart, man.
We
We
can't
better,
even- can't
we
even
better
leave him
bound
here."
him in thorns and with fetters and lock. You know, this guy's possessed. Sounds like he was possessed.
It's quite
The
possible.
occult, yeah, he was
I mean,
possessed.
if he's messing around with that kind of stuff.
Well, if
and
the
witchcraft
Assyrians have
and
to bind him,
enchantments,
and then you know he's way out there.
in chains and thorns, and things
Yeah.
like that. So I think
Yeah. So what did they do to him?
when
So he
yeah.
beseeches the Lord in his affliction,
Mhm.
humbled himself greatly before God. Wow.
And it's interesting because you find that most people do the same thing in a dire situation. Is they'll leave off whatever they previously believed and they'll go right to, maybe they don't know who it is or what it is, but they go right to believing that there is a God and that whoever it is will listen if they're in enough distress. You know.
Well, and that's good. It's good that you turn around. But I mean, just to imagine, I had a guy call me up one time on the phone, and he was a Mormon elder. He was one of the
Bishop
top
or something.
bishops or something in the Mormon Church.
It's been looking at me funny.
And he had found some publications that really explained to him, like I guess nobody else could, about the plan of salvation. And he recognized, I mean, I was listening to him tell me, and my heart was really just sobbing for him because he was saying, I've led all of these people over the last 25 or 30 years down the wrong path. Right? And he was like, what he was basically saying is, I don't know how I can live with that, how I can continue to go on. I think I tried to follow up and try to find out who he was and where he was. He never would give me any information because I was afraid he was just going to go out and kill himself. Because he was so, he recognized, what I tried to tell him was, okay, you've done this for whatever your motive was, but now God has converted you, right? And you're moving in a different direction. And now you have the responsibility of basically just being the correct example to all, and you don't know. God can reach all those same people that you were leading down the wrong road. But he was basically saying, well, they think I've apostatized and they have disowned me. So I don't even have any contact. I don't even have access to them anymore because they won't take my calls, they won't see me, they don't want me around, they just shun me, right? And he said, so I mean, I could hear it in his voice, he was just so depressed about the recognition of where he had taken people. And I mean, I don't know if Manasseh thought about that kind of thing and what he could do maybe to try to rectify that, but anything's possible with God.
What a sad commentary in verse 10. And the Lord spoke to Manasseh and to his people, but they would not listen.
Yeah. Well, that's the impression you get all throughout this history, is that God keeps trying to say something to them and keeps trying to express some truth or some information.
And God allowed them to be taken off to Babylon. And then that's the only thing that kind of woke him up, right? Because verse 12 there is what Elijah was reading. He humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers, prayed unto him. He was entreated him and heard his supplications and brought him again to Jerusalem into his kingdom. So he restored him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is good. I mean, that's if it's going to end, that's better to end on a positive note.
Well, and it's just a picture of how patient and loving God is, that you have this person who had a reputation worse than heathens.
Yeah.
And I think the main reason that it's considered worse than heathens is because he should have known better. Heathens, they're just doing their pagan thing out there, worshiping whatever they see fit, and there's a possibility they don't even know the first thing about God. But somebody like this who had a father who wrought such a revival, he should have known much better.
And I think one of the walls that he built there, because he came back and started a building project in Jerusalem there, I think that's still there. Or maybe that was torn down. Yeah.
But it is interesting too that God
Yeah.
hears him despite all that and that track record, that he's able, just like we read
Turn
way
things
earlier.
around.
Well, I mean, it was the same thing with Ahab.
Well,
like
one more
Ahab
this
was
was-
Same thing with
constantly like,
Solomon.
wicked king, bad guy, and then it was like, well, he said he was sorry, and God was like, okay.
And of
Like,
course, in
what?
15 there, he took away the strange gods and the idols out of the house of the Lord, and all the altars that he had built in the mount of the house of the Lord, and in Jerusalem cast them out of the city. Prepared the altar of the Lord, sacrificed therein peace offerings, thank offerings, commanded Judah to serve the Lord. So, I mean, he was converted.
Yeah,
He was converted.
yeah, and that's why I wanted to go to this, is
Nevertheless, the people did sacrifice still in the high places. I don't know what it is about these guys. They make a reform, and they've got the people going in one direction, but they don't take it all the way to where they need to.
Just
I mean,
fall
I've
short.
seen some of these high places in Gomorrah and these Canaanite cities. And man, I tell you what, you can just tell a lot of.
You gotta wonder, what was the attraction that they kept going back to this stuff?
It was almost like a drug.
Yeah.
Like you would get some kind of a rush or a high or something. It was addictive.
I suspect it was visitation of
Addictive.
demons or something
Yeah, it was
that
addictive.
came along with it, some kind of supernatural events that occurred. Because I can't think of any other reason why someone would go to bowing before a little image or
carved rock.
something. Yeah. And setting up these groves and everything.
I think it could be a combination of all that. I think peer pressure can be part of that. Society, I mean, because the culture of that region that they settled in had a lot of those things present,
Well, I can make my high place higher than yours.
Yeah, I mean, and the idea was like, what can you do? I mean, it's funny in some ways because you can see that the same legalism that they brought into like traditional Judaism is the same that they had at this place of like, what can I do to earn merit? What can I do to, appease God? The greater sacrifice I can give him, the better. And I think it's a lot of just trying to take control over those blessings and those things that God is willing to give you, but trying to have some measure of power over God instead of.
Well, the very fact that
being a
he
servant.
reigned for 55 years is, I mean, how can you stay in power for 55 years without having some support from everybody else, the military and the government and whatnot? You can't stay in power for that long unless there's some benefits that people are experiencing,
Yeah. Yeah, so we can continue on in this little chunk here. Verse 20, chapter 33 there. So Manasseh slept with his fathers, and they buried him in his own house, and Amon his son reigned in his stead. Amon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. But he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as did Manasseh his father. For Amon sacrificed unto all the carved images which Manasseh his father had made, and served them, and humbled not himself before the Lord as Manasseh his father had humbled himself. But Amon trespassed more and more, and his servants conspired against him, and slew him in his own house. But the people of the land slew all of them that had conspired against King Amon, and the people of the land made Josiah his son king in his stead.
Yeah, so he had the support of the people, and apparently there were some in authority that said, this guy's taking us right back down the toilet again like his father did. We're going to put the brakes on. and then they pay the price.
Yeah, and I think what seems probable in my mind is that these were servants left over from Manasseh's reign after he repented and started to clean house.
Right.
Yeah. And then they were probably just trying to protect that legacy by seeing that, like, oh, like his son is already too far gone, like he's gonna take us
Yeah,
right back
we
in
have the
there.
same thing going on today, don't we? Call it Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, I mean nothing really changes, does it?
Nope.
Power. People want power. They want adoration and
Yeah, true.
power and money, attention.
Yeah.
They're like drugs.
So you're back to 2 Kings now?
Yeah, and we've got like
5 minutes.
four more minutes, so if we want to, we can kind of get started on the next chapter a little bit.
All the,
Which will
all the way
be-
through? We can go all the way through 21, did we?
Well, okay.
It's-
Well, we
yeah,
can do
but-
that, but it's pretty much repeating what Chronicles records
Oh, is
as
it?
well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, verse 23, and the servants of Ammon conspired against him and slew the king in his own house.
Yeah.
The people of the land slew all them that had conspired against King Ammon, and the people of the land made Josiah his son king in his stead. Now the rest of the acts of Ammon which
So
he
if
did.
he was only 22, of course that didn't say when he was killed, right?
Well, he had reigned for 2 years and then was
Well,
killed
his
when
son,
he was
like,
24.
His son, like 6.
Josiah?
Yeah.
Just I said
8.
he was 8 when he began to reign.
Sounds close. I was just taking a guess.
Yeah.
8 years.
He was a young guy, so like how young was his child?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
I think to some
And
extent that some of
that's
these
nuts.
issues that happened with the
All about
with the
bloodline,
kids
baby.
that took over after their parents were kings, I think some of it has to do with the way they were raised, in the sense that most of the royal household. If you go back and look at the story of David, and how many wives and how many children he had. And one of the comments about, was it David, when they said that at no time did he ever say to his son, "Why have you done this?" He never corrected them. Apparently there was a kind of a disconnect because the king was here and the wives
He
and the
probably felt
kids
bad and
were
just felt
somewhere
bad.
else. And so I'd say a lot of these kids that grew up
Send a text message.
because they were children born from alliances with other heathen nations. These women, when they married the king, brought their pagan practices with them. So the kids were raised more or less by the mothers and the women in the court. And so they weren't really raised by their father, and they didn't have a lot of interaction with him. While they lived in the kingdom, they lived in a separate living quarters and probably didn't get much influence from him. And so a lot of this is a reflection of the kings marrying these pagan women who brought their practices with
Well,
them.
Ammon is right. I mean, that's what Lot's daughter called her child from Lot,
Yeah.
Ammon.
Yeah.
So,
What does that name mean?
Look it up just a second.
Amen.
It means Aman, of course.
Ammon.
Strong's.
Aman.
Ammon. It's Ammon.
It's Ammon.
Yeah, Ammon.
Amun.
Means skilled workman or master workman.
So if he was, what did you say, 22 when his son was 8, he got started pretty early.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, it says he started reigning when he was 22.
And he reigned for a
But
year
then,
or something.
Two
they
years.
conspired to eventually kill him, so that
So he was
probably took-
24, possibly.
Yeah, maybe 24.
Within that
But
range.
still, that's getting started pretty
Is
So
early.
what,
18?
18? 17 or 18?
Yeah.
My understanding is that in biblical times that marriages were started a lot younger.
When you're in the king's son, man, you see a little something you want. Hey, Dad, get me that, right?
So this royals.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it, what is it? Mary, when she became pregnant with Jesus, she was like 16?
It was a possibility. She could have been as young as 14.
Yeah.
There's no record, but
I mean, imagine that, and then an
But
angel
it-
shows up and he's like, "You got the Messiah." You're like, cool, thanks. Different
well,
culture.
you have to remember that they didn't operate on sociological rules. They operated on physical rules. When does a girl become a woman capable of producing children?
That's
In
when
her
she
teens.
can get married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when do most of them look their best? In their teens. So you see that trend. it wasn't an uncommon thing.
It's
The
okay.
problem is
It's
that
all right.
is that this generation, in all their education and sophistication, has become a lot more wayward.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have as much maturity because, you know, girls were raised to do the things they were supposed to do as wives and mothers.
Keep house.
Sweep and cook and mend.
And it was a lot more work than it is for us today.
Mhm.
So they were raised with a maturity level that's a whole lot different from this
Right, got all
generation.
kind of leisure time now.
I mean, I can't imagine most of the 14-year-olds I know now being married and having kids.
You don't need to imagine it for
And
some
yet
of them.
physiologically it was certainly capable. You know, it was certainly a possibility.
Just go
Yeah.
on TikTok and see the kind
Yeah,
of
just go on
maturity
TikTok.
level they have.
Mhm.
Yeah, you'll figure out why people are getting pregnant at that age. Yeah, I mean, it's different times, but having kids at that age, I'm sure it was easier for him because he was, you know, royalty and all, so you have everything you need to take care of all that. But yeah, next week we can pick it up about Josiah, which is going to be a little bit more interesting as
He's reigned
well.
30 years, 31 years.
Yeah, and his experience was pretty
He
interesting.
was a Star Wars baby.
A Star Wars
His mother
baby.
was Jedi.
Was it a Jedi?
Oh, mother's name was Jedida.
Jedida.
Jedida,
I don't know. I'd look at how it's pronounced.
the daughter of Adiah, the boss calf.
That's baby.
Yeah, I was like the boss. But yeah, we'll pick it up next week in chapter 22 and see what kind of shenanigans Josiah was up to as a ruling king at age 8.
Yeah.
Monarch. I mean, of course, he's not the youngest either.
Yedida is how it's pronounced. Yedida. The J is pronounced like a Y.
Gordita?
Lord
Yedida.
Fatty? Cool. What a nice name you have.
Means beloved.
Means little fatty. But yeah,
As long as you qualify it.
who was the other boy king? I think he reigned when he was 5 or 6. That we read about several chapters
Was
ago.
that the other Josiah?
Um,
The one who rebuilt the temple?
Yeah.
The one that the queen didn't know about.
yeah.
And when she saw them put the crown on his head, she started howling, "Treason! Treason!"
Yeah.
And don't you
And
remember
they
this?
took her out and killed her.
They took her out, yeah. She was a wicked queen.
She killed all of her children and
Children.
grandchildren
Yeah.
to take over the throne.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely lady. Classy.
Grandma?
Yeah, not anymore.
That's where the wicked stepmother stuff began to come
Yeah,
into
Grandma, what
play.
big eyes you have. Okay, I'm going the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it just got crazier and crazier as things went, but we'll pick it up next week there, and we can go ahead and close out in prayer in the meantime. Lord, we thank you so much for this day to get together, to study, and to be together with family. And we just ask that you would continue to help us through these studies in the coming weeks, that you would things in the history that you've left here for us, that we wouldn't repeat it, and that you would help us to mold ourselves more after the image of your Son, that we might be more effective people in your hands and more loving people towards each other as well. This we ask and pray in the name of your Son. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, for tuning in, and taking a part of your day to be with us. We hope that you received a real blessing from it. And it's just another confirmation. There's nothing new under the sun. We deal with the same kind of shenanigans today. And the result is also going to be the same, where the Lord is going to step in at some point and bring it to an end. And we know that that's going to be in the very near future. And so our responsibility is to just get ready for that. And so we're glad you're along with us, and hoping that we can encourage you to do that. And we'll see you again next time, back here, same place. So have a great week, everyone. God bless.